3 true horror stories that were never supposed to be found. Opening hook, 1 o'clock. The world's darkest secrets aren't always hidden. Sometimes, they're discovered completely by accident. A forgotten camera buried beneath a forest trail, a sealed apartment room no one knew existed, and a locked metal box that should have stayed underground forever. Each discovery exposed something no one could explain, and everyone who found them wished they hadn't. These are 3 terrifying stories of things that were never supposed to be found. In October of 2023, 26-year-old Ethan and his longtime friend Marcus decided to spend a Saturday exploring an abandoned state forest in northern Pennsylvania. The area had once been popular with hikers decades earlier before flooding damaged several trails. Since then, only photographers and experienced hikers occasionally visited the woods. The 2 friends weren't looking for anything unusual. They simply wanted to film abandoned places for their small travel channel. After parking near the old ranger station, they followed a narrow trail that disappeared deeper into the forest. The deeper they walked, the quieter everything became. Even the birds seemed to disappear. Marcus eventually laughed. "Feels like nobody's been here in years." Ethan smiled, but didn't answer. Something about the silence bothered him. After nearly 2 hours of hiking, they reached an area where several enormous trees had fallen years earlier. Their roots had torn huge holes into the earth. While stepping over one of the roots, Marcus suddenly stopped. Hold on. Half buried beneath wet leaves was part of an old black backpack. Only one torn shoulder strap remained visible. Curious, they dug it out. The backpack had almost completely rotted away. Inside were ruined clothes, an empty water bottle, a flashlight covered in rust, and an old digital camera. The camera looked surprisingly intact. Marcus laughed. Maybe someone's vacation pictures are still on there. Back home, they cleaned the memory card. To their surprise, it worked. Over 600 photographs appeared. The first pictures looked completely normal. A young man hiking, beautiful forest scenery, campfire photos, selfies beside rivers. Nothing unusual. The timestamps showed the pictures had been taken nearly 9 years earlier. Then Ethan noticed something strange. In one image, far behind the hiker, someone appeared to be standing between 2 trees. The figure was too distant to identify. Marcus zoomed in. It looked like a tall person wearing dark clothing. Neither of them thought much about it. Until the next few photographs, the same figure appeared again, closer, still standing perfectly still, always watching. Every new photograph brought it nearer. The hiker never seemed to notice. The figure never changed position. It simply waited, watching, always just beyond the trees. Marcus stopped smiling. This has to be someone following him. Ethan shook his head. Then why didn't he photograph them? The final 30 images became increasingly chaotic. Many were blurry. Branches, leaves, the ground, the sky. As if the camera owner had started running. The timestamps became only seconds apart. Photo after photo showed frantic movement through the woods. Then came the final clear image. The photographer had accidentally captured his own shadow, standing only a few feet behind him, was the same motionless figure. Its face couldn't be seen. Its arms looked impossibly long. The next photograph was completely black. After that, nothing. No more images. No final explanation. Only silence. The 2 friends searched missing person records from around that year. They found several disappearances connected to forests across the state, but nothing that matched the camera owner exactly. Eventually, they contacted local authorities. Search teams returned to the location where the backpack had been found. They searched for nearly 3 days. No campsite. No remains. No personal identification. Nothing. It was as though whoever owned that camera had simply vanished. Weeks later, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from the detective handling the case. The detective asked one strange question. "When you recovered the camera, did either of you notice someone watching you?" Marcus laughed nervously. "No." The detective stayed silent for several seconds, then quietly replied, "You're not the first people to recover strange belongings from those woods." Before Marcus could ask another question, the detective ended the call. Neither Ethan nor Marcus ever returned to that forest again, because neither of them could stop wondering who buried the backpack and why the final photograph looked as though someone had been standing directly behind the photographer, waiting for the exact moment the camera stopped taking pictures. When 29-year-old Olivia moved into apartment 214, she thought she'd found the perfect place to start over. The building was old, built sometime in the late 1950s, but it had recently been renovated. The rent was affordable, the neighborhood was quiet, and the apartment itself looked clean. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal, until the noises started. Every night, almost exactly at 2:14 a.m., she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the bedroom wall. At first, she assumed it was mice. She bought traps. Nothing. She called the building manager. An exterminator inspected the walls. No nests, no animals, no explanation. But the scratching continued, night after night. It never got louder. It never moved. It always came from the exact same spot. Then something even stranger began happening. Some mornings, Olivia noticed a thin layer of dust on the bedroom floor. The strange part? She cleaned the apartment every evening. The dust always appeared beneath the same section of wall where the scratching came from. One weekend, she decided to investigate herself. She tapped along the wall with the handle of a screwdriver. Most of it sounded solid, until one section. It echoed, like there was empty space behind it. She called the landlord again. This time, a maintenance crew arrived. After removing part of the drywall, they uncovered something no one expected. An old wooden door. It had been completely sealed behind the wall, covered with decades of paint and plaster. Even the building manager looked shocked. According to the renovation records, there wasn't supposed to be a room there. The workers forced the old door open. A wave of stale, freezing air drifted into the apartment. The room beyond was small, no windows, only a single rusted light fixture hanging from the ceiling. Dust covered everything. A tiny wooden chair, a narrow bed, an old dresser. Nothing appeared to have been touched in years. One worker quietly whispered, "Why would anyone hide an entire room?" As they searched, they found dozens of children's drawings scattered across the floor. Most showed ordinary things: trees, houses, families, but every drawing included the same figure. A tall person with no face, standing outside, watching. In one drawing, the figure was standing inside the room. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than the dust. Inside the dresser, Olivia found several worn notebooks. Each one belonged to the same child. The early pages described ordinary life, school, friends, favorite books. Then the entries slowly changed. "Someone stands outside my room every night. Mom says nobody is there. He doesn't have a face anymore." The handwriting became shakier, more rushed. The final pages were almost impossible to read. One sentence appeared over and over again. "Don't let him inside." Then came the final entry. "The scratching is coming from inside the wall now." After that, every remaining page was blank. The discovery spread quickly through the building. Older residents began sharing rumors. One elderly tenant claimed that decades earlier, a family had disappeared without warning. Another insisted the apartment had once been closed for years before being remodeled. No official records confirmed either story. The building owner ordered the room emptied immediately. Workers removed everything: the notebooks, the drawings, the furniture. By the following week, the hidden room had been sealed behind a new concrete wall, permanently. Olivia tried to move on. She convinced herself it had all been an unfortunate piece of forgotten history. Until 3 nights later, at exactly 2:14 a.m., she woke to a familiar sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Coming from the exact same wall, the wall that now had solid concrete behind it. She froze. The scratching continued for almost a minute. Then, it stopped. The next morning, she packed everything she owned. She broke her lease that same day. Months later, another tenant moved into apartment 214. The landlord never mentioned the hidden room, or what had been found inside it. But according to one former resident, the scratching still begins. Every night, at exactly 2:14 a.m. In the spring of 2024, a demolition crew was hired to clear an abandoned farmhouse that had sat empty for nearly 40 years. The property stood alone at the end of a forgotten dirt road, surrounded by acres of overgrown fields and dying oak trees. Local rumors claimed the family who once lived there had left overnight, abandoning nearly everything they owned. No one knew why. Most people simply avoided the place. For foreman Daniel Brooks, it was just another demolition job. By 8 a.m., the crew had already removed most of the furniture and started tearing up the old wooden floorboards in what had once been the living room. Then one of the workers struck something solid. It wasn't concrete. It wasn't rock. It was metal. Curious, they cleared away decades of dirt and rotten wood, until a heavy steel box emerged from beneath the floor. It was about 3 feet long, rusted, and secured with 2 thick padlocks. There were no markings, except one sentence scratched into the lid. "Do not open." Most of the crew laughed. Someone joked it was probably an old toolbox or forgotten family valuables. Using a grinder, they cut through both locks. The lid creaked open. Inside, there wasn't any money, no jewelry, no weapons, only a collection of strange personal belongings. A stack of faded family photographs, several cassette tapes wrapped in plastic, a child's stuffed rabbit, newspaper clippings about unexplained disappearances, and a sealed envelope. Daniel carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "If you're reading this, we failed. If the voices have stopped, leave this box exactly where you found it. If you can still hear them, it's already too late." The crew exchanged nervous glances. One worker laughed again. Someone had a weird imagination. Daniel wasn't convinced. He picked up one of the cassette tapes. Surprisingly, the tape looked almost untouched. An old recorder was eventually found inside one of the farmhouse cabinets. Against everyone's better judgment, they pressed play. At first, only static, then a man's exhausted voice. "If anyone finds these recordings, don't stay here after sunset." His breathing sounded uneven, as though he'd been running. "Something keeps walking around the house every night. It never comes inside, it just waits." There was silence. Then, 3 loud knocks echoed through the recording. The man stopped talking. Another knock. This one closer. His breathing became faster. "It's at the back door." A long pause. Then, "No, no, it's inside." The recording ended with violent crashing sounds before cutting into loud static. No explanation, no goodbye, nothing. The room had gone completely silent. Nobody said a word. One worker quietly switched the recorder off. Daniel suggested taking everything to the local sheriff's office. The others agreed. As they carried the box outside, one of the younger workers suddenly stopped walking. He was staring toward the second floor of the abandoned farmhouse. "What is it?" Daniel asked. The young man slowly pointed toward a dusty bedroom window. For just a second, he thought someone had been standing there, watching them. When everyone else looked, the window was empty. They laughed it off, packed everything into the truck, and left. The sheriff accepted the box as abandoned property. Photographs were cataloged, the cassette tapes were logged into evidence, the note was photographed. Everything appeared routine. 3 days later, Daniel received a phone call. The sheriff sounded confused. "We can't find the box." Daniel assumed it had been moved, but the sheriff explained. The entire evidence shelf where the items had been stored was empty. Not stolen, not damaged, simply gone. The security cameras had recorded nothing unusual. No one entered the evidence room. No alarms had been triggered. Officially, the case was marked as a filing error. Unofficially, every deputy who had listened to the tape refused to discuss it again. A month later, the abandoned farmhouse was finally demolished. Nothing remained except an empty patch of land. But people living nearby still claim that on quiet nights, when the wind is completely still, 3 slow knocks can sometimes be heard, coming from a place where no house stands anymore. Underscore, closing some discoveries solve mysteries. Others create new ones. A forgotten camera, a hidden room, a locked box buried beneath an abandoned home. Whether these events were coincidence, imagination, or something far more disturbing, one thing remains the same. The people who found them all wished they had left them exactly where they were. Which story disturbed you the most? Story 1, the camera in the forest? Story 2, the hidden room? Or Story 3, the locked box? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy suspenseful horror stories like these, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because next time, the thing that was never supposed to be found might be waiting for you.